What if the very emotions we suppress as leaders, stress, fear, doubt, are actually the key to our greatest power? Can you guide me through how emotional suppression is so common among high performers?
Emotions are a compass that point to really important things happening within us. And when we don't pause to feel them and to listen to them, they stick around and they build up and they end up causing a lot more problems in the long run than if we just sort of honor them and, feel through them.
Welcome to the Tyler Dickerhoof Show with me, your host, Tyler Dickerhoof. On today's episode, I am joined by Dr. Emily Anhalt. Emily is a doctor of clinical psychology and has conducted extensive research with prominent psychologists, entrepreneurs about how leaders can improve their emotional fitness. She wrote the book, Flex Your Feelings, as well the co-founder and chief clinical officer of COA, your gym for mental health. Emily, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. As we get started, I'm going to start with this. What if the very emotions we suppress as leaders, stress, fear, doubt, are actually the key to our greatest power? Can you guide me through how emotional suppression is so common among high performers and how it's destroying them from the inside out? That's setting the stage.
I think a lot of people in general were not necessarily given the space and permission and support and, example of how to just be present with and listen to your emotions as they come up. We're all kind of taught to push them away or to try to rationalize them. We feel like if an emotion doesn't make sense, then we shouldn't have it, or that if we're busy, that there's just no time for them. And the problem with that is that our emotions are a compass that point to really important things happening within us. And when we don't pause to feel them and to listen to them, they stick around and they build up and they end up causing a lot more problems in the long run than if we just sort of honor them and, feel through them.
Do you feel like we're in a generation where this is showing up more, or are we just more aware of it? It's kind of like the classic red car. If you have no comprehension, red cars are out there and all of a sudden one day, I'm going to go get a red car. You see red cars everywhere. Do you think that's kind of what's going on with our emotional acuity, or is there other things that are happening?
I definitely think these newer generations have a little bit more permission to be emotional beings, and that's nice. The conversation's happening more. I think the idea of self-care is becoming more prominent. But the problem with anything trending like that is it can kind of get co-opted and bastardized by companies that are trying to make money off of it. And so self-care has become this industry, and rather than it being about making thoughtful, compassionate choices for ourselves, it's sort of started to be used as an excuse to do whatever the hell we want and to spend a bunch of money on services and products. So I'm trying to bring us back to basics a little bit and to think of your emotional fitness the way you would your physical fitness, which is something that you can just be practicing in small ways every day to build a proactive overall kind of health.
It's kind of like going to the gym, having a really hard leg day. The next day you could barely sit down on the toilet, much less walk, and saying, I can't show up at work. And it's like, that doesn't quite work. That's what I take from what you just said there.
Interesting. Help me understand that parallel.
Well, meaning like, if we're doing emotional fitness work, right? We're doing the emotional work, and sometimes it's heavy. Sometimes we push ourselves a little more than we need to, where there's a lot of people like, I need to shut down my life. I can't deal with anything. I have to go into a dark room, as opposed to, I overdid it. Okay, I need to be aware. I need to maybe, instead of taking the stairs, I will use the elevator instead of, parking all the way out the, farthest extent of the parking lot and walking into work. I'm going to park up a little bit closer because my legs hurt. I'm going to get up and move around during the day rather than sit. That's one option, how you would deal with like really sore legs, as opposed to someone that's like, I'm going to lay in bed all day. I'm going to take all the, the drugs that I can to kind of make me not feel it, as opposed to I need to work through this process.
Yeah, again, I think the goal is if you work on it a little bit every day, then you'll sort of avoid that overaction kind of injury. And that's what I'm all about is what are the small everyday exercises? What are the emotional push-ups that you can be doing in an ongoing way to build that kind of strength?
So, I kind of make the comment that, I would say there's almost a generation of push it down, push it down, push it down. And some people have used that to say, oh, that's our greatest strength. That's what
Mm,
actually allows us. But, it's kind of like the classic Spider Man with great responsibility. With great powers comes great responsibility. There's almost this idea of if you utilize that to get you somewhere, like utilize fear to propel you, that has a really bad, dark back end.
Well, I think just ultimately you are going to eventually have to pay the piper. This idea
Mm,
of pushing feelings down, when you have to deal with something really acute, really overwhelming, and the only thing important is kind of surviving a tough thing, then yeah, it's not maybe the best time to feel all your feelings. But eventually you are going to need to reckon with
yeah.
them. And there is a problem that comes when you are constantly trying to push them away and you never circle back and give them some space to be known.
So, as you and have in your book, Flex Your Feelings, as you've worked with so many different executives, how did you kind of make the correlation between physical fitness, mental fitness, and really, exercising our brain being very similar to exercising our muscles? When I say brain, I mean all these emotional things that are, constituting our brain.
So I grew up in Silicon Valley. I've been around entrepreneurs and sort of in that environment for a really long time. And for the most part, entrepreneurs are, successful, high functioning individuals. And many of them do not identify as having really problematic psychological
Mm,
issues necessarily. But that doesn't mean that they don't want to level up the relationship they have with themselves and other people. And so I wanted to figure out how I could think about and talk about mental health in a less pathologizing way and in a less dichotomous way, like you're either mentally healthy or you're mentally ill, because most people are somewhere in the middle. And so when I thought about what a more proactive approach to mental health looked like, I realized that it really mirrors physical health in the sense that, we've come to know really just in the last few decades just how important proactive physical health is. It's a lot easier, less expensive, less time consuming to prevent physical illness than it is to fix it. And I think we're a little behind the curve on the emotional truth of that people tend to wait until they're in the throes of horrible depression or
mhm.
anxiety or stress or burnout to even begin thinking about their mental health. But at that point, so much has been lost. It's like waiting until you have heart disease to do cardio.
Yeah.
It's so much better to think about it early, but it's hard to know what that looks like. Like, what is an emotional push up? And so I really set out to create sort of a how to guide, a
Yeah.
fitness regimen for people who wanted to do that work.
So you share a lot of stories in your book. You share a few stories of yourself. I
Hmm.
want to kind of dig into more yourself because I want to know what has informed you through the process or what's really shown up for you. So, you know, just share with us where has like doing the reps helped you as a person?
Oh, where hasn't it helped as a person? I think is a better question. It's such an important everyday part of my life now. And it looks like different things every day, but I just try to be intentional about the idea that my mental health deserves my attention. And
Yeah.
so some of the emotional push-ups that I do regularly is, I ask for feedback from other people on a really regular basis. I am in my own therapy. I have time each day that I've set aside just to kind of be still with myself, meditative, and think about what it is that I'm feeling. I try to keep track of when I'm in an uncomfortable situation and how I could lean toward that discomfort instead of away from it. I am always trying to improve my communication and be a better listener, and it feels like a forever pursuit. And writing this book was amazing because I got all kinds of new ideas and thoughts
Yeah.
about what that actually looks like, and I try to put that into practice. I don't think I suggest anything in the book that I have not at least tried to
Yeah.
integrate myself.
How much of, as you just listed all that, how much that did that come naturally? Like some people can naturally run and other people it's like,
Mm,
dude, it's a process to learn. So how much of
right.
it came naturally for you as opposed to I got to put on my shoes, I got to go do it. I don't want to do it, but I need to do it.
Yeah. I'd say some, but not all. I think
Okay.
some of it came naturally in the sense that I had the privilege of growing up in a psychologically minded family. I was in therapy young because I had ADHD, so I was sort of comfortable with that idea. And I practiced in that way from a young age. But some of it was very difficult and uncomfortable.
Like what?
And that's kind of the point is if it's easy and comfortable, you're probably not really doing the work. If you go to the gym, you're there for an hour and you leave and you weren't uncomfortable at all, I doubt you got any faster or stronger. And
Yeah.
that's the same here. If you're not willing to tolerate a little discomfort, you're probably not going to get stronger emotionally.
So what was hardest for you?
For me, I talk about this a little in the book. The hardest part of my discomfort journey was physical discomfort. I'm pretty comfortable with emotional discomfort. It's what I do for a living. I had so many years in grad school becoming a therapist to learn how to manage emotional discomfort. But I was a really sick baby. And so I feel like I'm wired to be very fearful of physical discomfort. I don't like being cold. I don't like being hungry. I don't like it when, like, even spicy food, anything that makes my body feel uncomfortable, I'm not very good
I
with.
thought it was just my wife. Just like the things that you just described, that's my wife. She's always cold. It could be 95 degrees. She is sweating and she's like, I'm kind of chilly. I'm like, really? Come on, get over this. Like, so you're telling me stuff that's unique to you. I just thought it was my wife. So,
Totally. And I think this is true for a lot of people. Some people are just
yeah.
not as comfortable in their bodies in general. So a big part of my journey has been, okay, well, then I need to learn how to deal with this discomfort and not
Yeah.
let it stop me from having the experiences I want to have. And what that looks like is just finding small ways to lean toward it instead of away from it. So when I'm cold, what I would have done before is just run inside, even if what was happening outside was fun. And now I think, all
Mhm.
right, let me sit with this for a second. How cold am I? Am I in danger? Am I okay? Do I just need to take a second to kind of remind myself that I'm safe and it's fine and that
Yeah.
it won't last forever? And then some of the discomfort goes away when you realize
Yeah.
it's not as much of an emergency as you thought. So that's a lot of what this practice is.
Well, so I love you sharing that because what I glean from that is there's almost like a rationality that comes to say, am I in danger or not?
Yeah.
Because we can be, and especially if we're talking about like mental fitness, like I can go to the gym, oh man, that hurt. Do I need to keep doing it or do I need to shut it down for the day? And I think the response from you is like you would face that physical discomfort and you're just like, I'm going to get away from it. I don't want that discomfort instead of, man, I got to weigh it and understand, is it worth it? So as I frame that, do you find that in so many different ways relates to all the differences
Mm.
that you work with and it's helping people either build resilience or just say, oh, be uncomfortable because that's where growth will be. And I know that's trite, but I'm trying to connect the dots there.
No, I think that's really what a lot of emotional fitness boils down to is learning how to tolerate your discomfort in various ways and grow from it. And, what stands between us and everything we want in life is discomfort. Like literally
Yeah.
everything you want in life lives on the other side of discomfort. And so the more you learn how to tolerate it, and by that I don't mean you should be panicked or in
Yeah.
pain or putting yourself in danger. It's just about figuring out what do I defend myself against unnecessarily and how could I get stronger if I didn't? And, something you just said reminds me of this idea I talk about a lot, which is the advice always trust your gut. I actually
Mm.
don't like that advice
Mm.
because our gut instinct tends to be formed around trauma more than truth.
Mm.
Our gut instinct
Okay.
is a response to anything that has made us feel unsafe in the past, and now it's trying to keep us from being unsafe again.
Mm.
So, for example, if you were bitten by a dog as a kid, your gut instinct around all dogs might now be that they're dangerous. But not all dogs are dangerous. And we need our gut instinct, right? If your gut instinct is telling you don't walk down that dark alley, you should probably
Yeah.
listen to that because there's
Yeah.
no reason to put yourself in danger unnecessarily. But when your gut instinct says, oh, don't be in this healthy relationship because what you're used to is unhealthy relationships,
Yeah.
then you have to bring your mind in and say, well, wait, is this instinct actually serving me or not? And so, that's where self
Wow.
awareness comes in and mindfulness and all of the traits.
Man, I didn't expect to dig into that, but I love that because what gut response is instinctual and kind of what you just said is and as I understand so much instinct is subconscious. And so it really you have to say, whoa, let me be aware. Why am I responding in this way? What am I responding to? Because I think in a lot of relationships, it becomes very inward. I responded this way, so it must be just.
Mm,
Instead of saying, I responded to a coworker, a friend, a spouse. They said something. I responded. I can be justified, as opposed to, yeah, it really didn't happen that way. Why did I respond in such a manner?
totally. Yeah, we're bringing all kinds of unconscious and subconscious experiences with us into our present life. And, one of my favorite quotes is by psychologist Carl Jung. He said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate." People think that things are just happening to them, but actually, our unconscious minds are driving us toward and away from things all the time that may not actually be in our best interest. And so, the more you come to learn about yourself, the more you bring some of those unconscious thoughts into your conscious mind, the more you can make intentional and thoughtful
Yeah.
choices about your life.
So I did a podcast with a lady, Thais Gibson. I don't know if you know her name, know who she is, but
Mm-mm.
she mentioned in that roughly 5% of our actions are actually conscious. 95% of what we
Mm,
do is subconscious. And so kind of what you're saying, maybe you agree with the numbers, not whatever. What I'm hearing from you is part of this idea of developing our emotional fitness is kind of like sometimes you develop muscles so you can actually like flex and use muscles that you just didn't even know that you could. What I'm gathering is similarly to what you're, whether you in the book, the 7 traits, or as you go through this process is like, hey, part of this is just helping you really understand and dictate that subconscious because you can, as opposed to that's just the way I am. That's just the way I respond.
Yeah, research shows that 95% of people would rate themselves as self aware, but really only 5 to 10% of people actually
Yeah.
qualify as being self aware.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that. You know everything you do know about yourself, and that feels like a lot. And you also probably notice things that other people don't know about themselves. So, in comparison, it seems like you're so much more self aware,
Yeah.
but you don't know the things that you don't know. And
Yeah.
so, a big part of emotional fitness is accepting, oh, there are probably a lot of things that I'm hiding from myself without realizing it. I have a lot to learn about myself that I wouldn't even know to look for. And it's worth the work and effort to uncover some of those things.
I love what you shared there. I had someone share with me is there's no way for you to be self-aware. Meaning, and kind of to that point, 95.5, right? It's like the only way you can become self-aware is if somebody else tells you what they're seeing. And I learned that one day when I was really on camera like this. And I just constantly and never mirrored it. And so if you had words here, it would always be backwards, however it
Mm.
showed. And someone's like, oh, I can't read it. You need to flip it around. And so I flip it around. I'm like, that guy's ugly. Like if things don't match up. And then I stopped and realized, oh, that's what everyone else sees.
Mm,
And I
yeah.
did this practice one time when I was speaking. I had everyone take a picture on their phone and say, now go open up the picture. And they're like, oh, yeah, that's what everyone sees. And so it's kind of like that dynamic. What you just said is, how do we get closer to what everyone else sees is what I gather from that, what you just described.
Yeah, I've heard it described as a person can't know themselves any more than a knife can cut itself. We're so close to who we are that we can't observe ourselves from afar. So the way we do come to observe ourselves and know ourselves is through other people. We really
Yeah.
exist in relation to other people. So that's why a lot of emotional fitness is about gathering feedback and being curious and asking questions and strengthening your relationships so that you can see yourself more accurately.
How much have you seen that lack of self-awareness? If we've defined really self-awareness is accepting or being informed by what other people are sharing and saying, hey, this is the holistic picture. Not a great description, whatever, but just, well, take that. How much have you seen in your work? Has that dramatically changed over the last 5 to 7 years with, social media to, more remote work, like you just said, working at home, where I'm not around people to say, hey, Emily, you're being a little, or Tyler, you're like, what's going on? Like, we don't have those interactions. Like, is that affecting our ability to be self-aware today?
I would think so. And I
Okay.
think too about having all of these social media personas that we portray ourselves a particular way, and it's not necessarily accurate. It's certainly not a
Mm,
full picture. And then we come to see ourselves that way. I mean, I've talked to younger people who say that they don't really like to look at themselves without a filter because they're used to
yeah.
presenting themselves that way, and then
Yeah.
without it it feels so problematic in comparison. And there's an emotional aspect of that too, where when you project a certain idea of what your life is like and what's working and everything, then your real life feels incongruent somehow. So yeah, I think the fact that we're living online, that we're not in person the same way, all of that is probably making things a little harder.
As the father of a 18, almost 19-year-old girl,
Uh-huh.
and the numbers of times, like, we'll be doing something as a family or on the boat or whatever else, like, you can't share that photo. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's like, let me look at it first. And
Yeah.
it's this idea of subconsciously, I think she's doing that as opposed to whatever, it's not a big deal. But yet consciously saying, oh my goodness, I need to check and
Mm,
verify what are other people going to think of me.
yeah.
And, it's the classic, and I was with someone the other day, we took a picture and he's like, well, let me see that first, make sure it's all right. And I said, you understand you're the only one that cared what you looked like and
Mm.
what you just said. And I think that is, to me, that's where we even need greater evidence of, oh, we got to do the mental work.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's more important than ever because so many of our relationships are being replaced by technology, and we need our humanity. We need our connection. We're communal
Yeah.
creatures. And so, it requires a lot of work to maintain that.
So tell me, you share a lot in the book. You've worked with dozens and hundreds and thousands of clients, whether through your speaking, your individual consulting, or through COA. What are you seeing as like this the great end result? We talk about this disconnectedness to connectedness. What are you kind of, if you had to summarize, man, this is what people are really finding as they start to become more mentally, emotionally fit?
So, I would say the biggest change could be characterized by the idea that you go from having this feeling that life is happening to you to realizing that you are creating your life in so many ways, that the choices you are making are rippling out into your life in all kinds of ways. People often come to my offices and say, oh, I just keep ending up with the same type of partner.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you don't keep ending up with the same type of partner. You are drawn to and pulling towards you the same type of partner because there's something about that type of partner that's familiar or comfortable or something you're trying to understand. And when you become aware of that, when you realize that, when you learn what those reasons are, and when you examine if they're still serving you, then you can make a different choice. And suddenly you might not end up with that kind of partner. And that is happening in every aspect of our life. The kind of people we surround ourselves with, the kind of job we decide to do, how much we just feel like a victim of life versus how much we own our agency. And so that's the
Hmm.
big change that I think happens is you start to feel that you are the agent of your own life and that you get to decide what your life looks and feels like.
Do you think that agency scares a lot of people?
Probably. I think especially if you were never given the feeling that you have it, then, becoming an adult can be scary because suddenly you're responsible. You are the common factor in all of your life circumstances. And
Yeah.
that's a tough pill to swallow sometimes. But to me, it's so empowering. After
Yeah.
the initial discomfort of it, I think it's such a powerful thing to realize that you can design the life that you want by becoming more aware of who you are and more emotionally fit.
We see it so often, like in just, we'll say physical fitness. Oh,
Uh huh.
this is just who I am. This is what I am. This is my genetics, as opposed to, no, you can dictate a lot of it, maybe not all of it. Like my general conformation, I can't go from being, roughly 6 foot tall to 6'3" like my son. Less major surgery. I can't change that. But my muscular conformation, those things I can change within, a genetic reason. But to say that, oh, I am what I am, it's kind of a
Right.
lot saying it's like, oh, I'm just, woe is life. This is what I'm going to be. It's like, no, you can take agency, but there's a mentality that you have to gain to say, I want to do it. I
Right.
need to do it. People
I'm
around me
willing to be
deserve it.
uncomfortable to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's, very much like you've said, the gym's like, yeah, you got to go do the work.
Right. Yeah. And I
Um,
have empathy for people not wanting to do the work because it's scary and hard and vulnerable and we weren't really taught how and we're invested in staying the same in a lot of ways. Change is really scary. I've just seen it work over and
yeah,
over and over again. And there's just not a single human being who would not benefit from investing in their emotional health in a proactive
yeah.
way a little bit more.
In regards to like some of the leadership stuff, some of the stuff that I go through and what I realized I had to learn myself very much along the lines of things that you talked about in your book is I have to do the work on my own, but I don't have to do it alone.
Mm.
And I wonder how much of as you stop and you think about that is like, it's a way more fun to go to the gym with other people.
Oh,
And so
yeah.
like tell me how you've either helped people or you prescribe, hey, you got to do this work on your own, but you don't have to do it alone.
Yeah, the thing we say at COA is emotional fitness is an individual journey, but a communal pursuit.
Love
So
it.
when you go to the gym, no one can lift your weights for you. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
how rich you are, or how smart you are, or how fit you are, or anything. You have to lift the weight if you want to get stronger. But it is a hell of a lot easier to do that when there's someone spotting you, someone cheering you
Yeah.
on, when there are people around who are also on their fitness journeys who are inspiring you to go further or who show you how far you've come. And the same is true with emotional fitness. It is impossible to have someone else do this work for you, but it's just so much easier and more fun when you're doing it with community. So,
Mhm.
a lot of emotional fitness is about finding your people. Find people who also care about this stuff. Get into therapy so you have someone wonderful to speak to in an ongoing way. And, it just gets endlessly more productive when you don't feel like you're doing it in isolation.
So, I mean, you talk about the isolation of it. You also mentioned it at the very beginning. It's kind of like we've taken this pendulum to where it's almost corporately or in office settings, like
Right,
another
right.
mental health day. Like you're bringing that to me, and like lack of empathy, which you talk about, which I embrace. Like, how do we combat that? How do we make it more holistically inviting to say, "I get it. I'm with you." As you talk about it, practicing empathy.
I think that looks different for each person. I think about physical fitness. Offices have started to bring that in too. There's gym memberships, there's yoga classes at lunch, there's healthier eating, and those things do help. You spend so much time at work, it's very helpful to have proximal and accessible options for you that are good for your health. But ultimately, you have to decide that it's important enough to you that when you go home, you're still making sure it's part of your routine. And that's true with all this emotional fitness is you ultimately have to decide I'm going to prioritize this and I'm going to make time for it and I'm not going to wait for it to be convenient or comfortable to do it. So that looks different for every person and that's why I say a lot emotional fitness is not a one size fits all practice. In the book I start with a self-assessment of which of the 7 traits are your strengths and which are your areas of growth so you have some sense of where to start and then it all ends up building on itself. So wherever you start the rest of the traits will also naturally get stronger.
Yeah, I think one of the big challenges I see as I talk to people is I would say a cultural divide in organizations that get it, understand, want to be caring and empathetic and work with people, and the organizations where um I don't want to say it's the good old boys club. It's kind of like, no, this is the way we've done it. We're gonna stick to this. This is the way it's gotta be. And it's kind of like it doesn't have to be. And where I see is people that have gone through tough things feel like I can't be myself here. Or I see a lot of times where, especially that hard callous, where women are challenged to say, I have to be a different person. Coming back to that playing the role, I see, it happens in men and women, but more specifically in women, oh, I have to be tougher. I have to be more, how do I want to say? I mean, you know what you've gone through, you've worked with those people. It's like I have to be almost devoid of emotion or, overbearing to be in a leadership role. And it's like, no, none of us need that.
Hmm. It's complicated because it can feel like people do need that. If that's the culture of your company and those are the people who succeed and move up, then it can feel like you have to conform in that way. But what I've seen over and over again is that
Yeah.
healthy leaders equal healthy returns. And the people who are investing in this do see dividends from that. And the organizations where leadership is prioritizing this stuff, those are the organizations where everyone else is going to feel like they can too. So it really starts at the top. If you are in a leadership position of any kind, the best thing you can do for your team, for your company, for your customers is to prioritize your own mental and emotional health, because you are setting the tone for what other people step into and what is sort of passed on through your product and all of that. So start with yourself and watch it ripple out from there.
You know, as the first point that you bring in the book is mindfulness. And one of the challenges that I see is people don't take time to think.
Hmm.
I don't have time to think. My schedule is just so stacked up. I got to keep going. I got to press and do more. And I have to wonder here, as you talk about, as you work with people, obviously you start there, but do you see that as well as like so many roles, so many people, they don't have a time to just stop and let their brain process and like think?
So I think you're definitely right that people don't take time to pause and be still with their thoughts. But I think I would put out there that much more than a problem of people not having time to think is that people don't take time to feel. I think especially in the world of
Yeah.
tech and business, people are really good at thinking. They're so good at using their minds, they're comfortable using their minds, and they're constantly trying to think their way out of feelings.
Okay.
And the problem is you can't think your way out of a feeling. You have to feel your way out of a feeling. And, you know, I get reactions to this where people are like, oh, yeah, sure. But it really is a big deal if you are not letting yourself experience your emotions. They will build up, they will act out, they will have control over your actions in a way that does not serve you. And if instead you have some time to sit still with your thoughts and your feelings and you let them pass through you, then you stop carrying them around with you all the time, and you can make more intentional choices.
So maybe people that aren't aware of that themselves, but how does that show up? Like not taking time to feel.
Sure. So, what would be a good example? One thing I see a lot with entrepreneurs is they are really stressed out. They're tired. They're anxious. They're not sure if they're even doing the work they really want to do. They miss their families and they're totally prioritizing work. And they keep telling themselves, I don't have time to think about that. I don't have time to feel about that. I just need to focus. And then what ends up happening? They burn out in a pile of flames and they end up making big mistakes in the company or getting sick or any number of things that happens when you don't prioritize these things. Same with like in a relationship, instead of having the difficult conversations, instead of feeling your disappointment or your sadness, instead of expressing your gratitude and your appreciation, the conversations get pushed off and pushed down, and then it all blows up into some big fight that's much bigger than it should be, that's about so many more things than it seems like it's about. And then that's so much harder to clear up than if you had just been doing that work along the way.
It's the consummate, what is it, sweeping underneath the rug, and the rug
Right.
gets so big and so big and so
Yeah.
big, and somebody walks in and is like, what's underneath there? And like, nothing, nothing to see here, right?
Totally.
Till you trip over it and you're like, what is that? Um, you know, as you survey between your clients, but between COA, is there a difference where it's showing up in our demographic? Like, are, younger people, the 15 to 29, are they experiencing more mental health challenges than the 30 through 45? Or do you find it's kind of across the spectrum? It just, we're talking about it more. So maybe, oh, I'm younger, I'm experiencing, as opposed to somebody who's 65 is like, no, I know what you're talking about. Like, help me understand that.
So I would want to look at research to figure out exactly what that's saying about how different generations are experiencing things. But there are a few things I know to be true. One of them is younger people are really suffering as a result of their lives being lived online so much that as connected as we are, we're lonelier than ever. And, we need each other. And I think younger people don't have access to each other in the same way. Even something like I just read a study that talked about how kids are not left to just play outside together anymore because parents are fearful about something happening to them or, about them not being productive or whatever it might be. And there's valid reasons to have worries, but we need as kids to have time to be bored and to play and to connect with each other. And then you get handed a phone, and now all of a sudden, everything you're doing is in the phone. And so there's a lot of skyrocketing in depression, anxiety, stress, all of that for that reason. But I feel optimistic in that the younger generation has so much more permission to talk about what they're going through and to find other people out there who've experienced similar things. So there's pluses and minuses. We're all kind of
Yeah.
suffering in our various
Yeah.
ways, but I do feel confident that every person, every generation, every age would benefit from putting a little more attention onto their emotional life and spending a little more time prioritizing it as an important part of their overall health.
My kids are, 18, 17, 16. So they were young before we had cell phones to just hand to them. And
Right.
so like they were forced to a little bit. Whereas I know with my nephews and nieces, like, yeah, it's just easy to give them a phone. And it's easier if I'm attentive on work and I'm trying to do those things, balancing everything. And I'm distracted
Yeah.
where we don't get that personal time. And let's go explore and find out what's safe. He's saying he sees it all the time. Alex is saying he sees it all the time at the parks and out with people. It's hand him the phone. I'm doing my distracted thing, trying to get connected online instead of saying hi to the person right next to you. It's kind of like, I would say, this perpetually bad habit
Hmm.
that we need to break. And I think your work in talking about it is helping people break to say, instead of working more, let's connect more. Let's do the mental fitness things. Let's go unlock why we have their feelings. Go ahead.
Oh no, I just agree with everything you're saying. And I might go even farther to say it's not just a habit. I'd say it's more like an addiction. At this point, I think we're so addicted to the
Yeah.
technology. Our phones are little dopamine machines, and it's like a slot machine. You're getting a hit every time you get a notification. And now our brains are starting to have trouble just being without that at any given moment. And then add to that, the world is just in a wild, crazy place right now, and people are just trying to cope however they can. And that can lead to bad habits. I've heard the idea that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection. And
Oh, yeah.
I think the way through this wild technology addiction that we all have is to get back to the basics of just connecting with other people again.
Maybe you know this, maybe you don't. The dehumanization that's happened over time, whether it's through technology, whether it's through being online connected, not connected in person, how much do you think that is really kind of exacerbated some of the, I would say the telltale signs of what you're seeing, and almost like keeping people from being willing to put their hand up and say, "Hey, I need help," because again, we've gone to technology rather than go to a therapist.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of concerns about that. There's this
Yeah.
rise of AI therapy kind of happening. And don't get me wrong, I'm not anti AI overall, but so many of our relationships are already being replaced by technology. And the kind of connection we're seeking is an authentic one. And I don't think that the cure for the loneliness we feel because of technology is connection with more technology. I think it's really about being witnessed and cared for by another human being. That's what we really want and need. And it's going to feel very tempting to turn to technology because it's less vulnerable, it feels less risky, it's more accessible, it's cheaper. Like there's some good
Yeah.
and fair reasons, but it's like fast food, it keeps you from starving, but in the long run it causes a lot more problems. And we need to
Yeah.
prioritize nourishing human
Yeah.
connection above everything else.
You've worked with a lot of elite performers, athletes, people that have embraced Koa, like Kevin Love, who kind of was a early adopter of this idea of mental health and performance.
Yeah.
Um, how have you, again, professed that this isn't for people that are broken? These are for people that want to get to the next level. It's kind of like, you're here, that's fine. But if you want to go next level and really accomplish what's possible, it really takes this type of work.
The comparison I use a lot is no world-class athlete ever achieved their potential without the support of a coach. And similarly, none of us is going to reach our full emotional potential without support, whether it's through therapy or community or any number of other things. But this does require work, and we tend to wait until things are really bad to focus on this. But at that point, you just have such a harder battle.
Mhm.
And I really would encourage people to play the long game here and to think about how much strife and stress they'll prevent by focusing on it right now. And so I'm so grateful for people like Kevin Love and all of the other leaders out there who are saying, hey, I'm doing pretty well in life, but I still struggle and I still
Yeah.
benefit from this kind of work. So you will too, So
Yeah.
that's the best thing we can do is work on yourself and then be loud and proud about it, which gives
Yeah.
other people permission to do the same.
I think as I've personally gone through that, and I just realized last week as writing his newsletters how long I endured kind of that.
Mm,
I would say the broken mirror in regards to my confidence and what I'd done professionally until I got to a point where I had been frustrated enough to work on myself and really start to understand and challenge, like, why do I show up this way? Why do I
mm,
react this way? And I think as leaders, so often we get by with just good enough that we
yeah.
don't look for that help, or it's kind of the classic, the sink or swim. And, it's the idea of like, well, I need them to, other people, they got to go through hard stuff. I went through hard stuff. I figured it out. That's when I'm going to help them, as opposed to, no, I just need to find a swim coach and help
Mm.
them learn how to swim. How much do you see that as the role with, training emotional fitness? And really it's kind of like, we're going to use this as a tool as opposed to a solution.
Right. I mean, there is no solution because life includes suffering. The goal of emotional fitness is not to be happy all the time. It's not to live a life with no pain. It's about setting yourself up to weather the storm of life more effectively. And accepting that is really freeing
Yeah.
because there is so much in our society that's constantly being sold to people like, if you do this, that's the solution. You're going to be happy. You're going to be great. You're never going to need
Yeah.
anything again. And that's just not the existential truth of our existence. Sometimes life is just really hard, and getting better at dealing with hard things is going to serve you more than trying to avoid hard things all the
Mhm.
time.
When you stop and think about this and you think about, man, if this were to, I don't want to say change, or if our society were to embrace, in regards to a facet of emotional fitness, man, I really think that's going to be the camel that breaks the straw that breaks the camel's back, or the inflection point. What do you perceive that to be right now?
What do I think the straw that will break the camel's back is?
Yeah, like in regards to, if we all the things we've talked about, this is going on, we can recognize it, we can see it. But what's going to be the thing that, man, if I could do this, if I knew I was able to do this, man, we would go on a different trajectory. What do you think that is?
The first thing that pops into my mind is I think a big difference will be made when empathy and relationships and emotional fitness is taught to young kids in school. Because by the time you're an adult, your patterns are really set and a lot of damage has been done and a lot of trauma has gone unseen and unprocessed and unacknowledged. And when you start young and when you learn these skills young, the differences that are made are so profound. And they've shown that. I was just looking at something. I wish I had the exact information, but I think in I don't know,
It's good.
Dutch schools started integrating empathy and,
Okay.
EQ classes really young, and the rate of almost every problem in society went down as a result. So that's the thing that I think might make all the difference is when we start understanding that little brains need help figuring out how to grow into healthy adults, and we need to give those tools as soon as possible.
I had to learn empathy. And, it's going back and not understanding that I didn't understand empathy. I
Mm,
remember going through Clifton Strengths. This has been 10 years ago now, and my empathy was really low. And I was like, okay. And then I realized that that was the solution for my insecurities. But this
mm,
is the challenge I had. And you write about your book, and I want to have a conversation about it. When, you go to office settings and you go to, oh, empathy, and people are like, I'm empathied out. Like, I believe a big part of that is it's hard to understand. Like, if you go back to the classic definitions like Brene Brown, you start to look back and you have a definition. I want to go through that, is to put myself in someone else's shoes. I joke and say that's going to hurt one of us. Meaning,
mm,
if I put my feet in your shoes, my feet probably aren't going to fit in your shoes because I doubt you wear a size 13. And if we're in there together, that's going to hurt. And so I tried to frame in my mind, all right, how can I think about this differently? And I came up with this. It's put your arms around someone and walk with them. And that helped me understand empathy. But I want you to take from that. And as you're saying, that's the solution. How do we get people to embrace it more? Is it understanding it? Is it being willing to practice it? Like, go with me there.
So I define empathy as letting yourself feel what other people are feeling in order to understand them.
Yeah.
And the reason why in the book self-awareness comes before empathy is if you are not comfortable feeling your own feelings, you're definitely not going to feel comfortable feeling anyone else's feelings. So first you have to get comfortable with your own
Yeah.
emotions in order
Yeah.
to be able to meet other people in theirs. The other aspect of empathy that I think is widely under talked about is the importance of boundaries alongside empathy. Empathy is not this endless resource that you should just be giving with with reckless abandon. You also have to have boundaries so that you're not giving more than you actually have to
Yeah.
give.
Yeah.
And we're not always taught how to be both empathetic and boundaried. So that to me is a really important skill. But I love your idea of keeping people company in things as a way to empathize with them.
Well, one thing that I've worked through, right? This definition of putting your arms around someone and walking with them. If you've ever done that, if you try to drag them, it's not going to work. If they
Right.
try to drag you, it's not going to work. That's like the boundaries. We have to be in this together. The other piece, which I think kind of aligns with the self awareness, is I have to be willing to be vulnerable with who I am. It's not victim, it's not dumping on people. And if you lift your arm and expose yourself, it's a vulnerability. And so it's kind of
Mm,
like, to again, as you just said, those practices, which I love your definition, is very that being willing to have those feelings and be with someone in it and go with them and yet not become the victim, not become the I'm going to be the solution to all your problems. And so I love that you bring that up as the solution. And it's how do we embrace it sooner? And I think what it comes back to is being willing to, and you talk about in your book, especially young kids, is like express your feelings. Your
mm,
feelings are okay. Why do you have those feelings? And it's really hard as parents often, I think, and as adults, because we don't know either. And so
right.
it's kind of like, how do we teach these kids? And I failed psychology in college because I didn't go to the class. Well, I went to the class. I just didn't read. It was one of those Ivy League 2,400 people in a classroom. We're like, oh my goodness, like 8 o'clock in the morning. I learned a lot, but it was just, I think that's where the idea of, do I want to understand me? Because, ooh, that sounds like I got to deal with some stuff. I don't want to deal with it.
For sure. It's really hard to do it if you were never taught how to do it. And even really well intentioned, loving parents, sometimes their kid will be upset and the parent will say, all right, well, what are we going to do about it?
Yeah.
Instead of saying, oh, you're sad. That makes sense. Let's just be sad together for a second and then we'll figure out what we're going to do. Just
Yeah.
a little bit of permission to acknowledge what your mind and body are trying to tell you is so powerful. And so as adults, we can do this for ourselves. We can kind of reparent ourselves in that way. And the next time you're sad, the next time you're angry, the next time you're anything, just pause and say, okay, I'm going to sit with this feeling for a second. I don't need to fix it. I don't need to change it. I don't need to think it through. I can just feel it and then I'll move forward.
Do you think the reason that a lot of people respond that way is there's almost a evolutionary quality to pushing yourself through. Like I think as you describe that, I think of a lot of immigrants who maybe generations ago or currently they come and they will endure for a better life, whatever
Mm,
that community is. And so they will push it down and just, I have to push myself. And it's almost this quality of like, they talk a little bit of like leaders that, as individual contributors, what gets them to that place makes them really, really bad leaders because
mm,
they ostracize others. And so it kind of like, it's almost fighting this nature of, I don't want to say survival because it's not right. You have to have community for survival, but what we've envisioned as survival instead of, yeah, hey, how are we going to fix it? As opposed to, all right, let's just sit there. Like,
yeah.
let's think about what is that telling us?
No, I do think it's about survival. When your main focus is surviving, then spending a lot of time sitting around and feeling might not serve you. But, we're living 3 times as long as we
Yeah.
were back then. And
Yeah.
we, have a completely different fabric of our society now. And I think that it's not just about survival. Now it's
Yeah.
about enjoying life, being present in life and feeling actualized and fulfilled. And that's all going to be really hard to do if you're in that fight or flight survival mode all the time. So we have to learn how to kind of come back to ourselves and, heal our minds in some ways.
The curse of the American pursuit of
Yeah.
pursue at all ends and say, I will celebrate, win. And so often not. And, the final trait that you share is, you know, joy and just being playful and fun and just like, all right, be okay with it. Whatever it is what I took and hear from you is how much do you think that's kind of what's missing in a lot of ways?
Oh, it's huge. It's the last trait because I think you have to work on all the other ones to be able to be truly playful. We only play in situations where we feel safe. And play
Mm,
is so undervalued and important as adults. And when I say play, I'm not just talking about a board game or a video game.
yeah,
I'm talking about being a yes and person. It's about removing constraints and thinking big and moving out of that black and white thinking and allowing creativity and connecting with other people in this joyful way. And, you know, remembering that life isn't all so serious is
yeah.
so important. And, I read a study once that showed that people who play regularly live longer by a significant number of years than people who don't play regularly. That's how important it is. But playing is vulnerable. So
Yeah.
until you feel like you're in safe company and in a safe place, it's going to be hard to do.
As you said that, I thought about the movie Yes Day. I think it's Yes Day. That movie where the kids are like, the dad agrees to whatever you say, yes, whatever you want to do, I'm going to say yes, and we're just going to go do it. And they
Right.
drive through a car wash with the top down and all the windows open. And it's just, I sit here and as we wrap up and we think about it, it's like, man, in my business, in my work, that how can I just say, hey, we're going to have a yes day? In your office, it's like whatever, we're just going to have a yes day. And maybe you have some guardrails because we're not going to, fill the entire room with, bubbles or whatever, like give us like destructive, but it's like, yes, yes, let's just embrace that as yes.
Mm,
I think that would be fun.
I think
Are
so
you going to,
too. I think we could
all
all
right.
benefit from some of that.
As we wrap up, Emily,
Yeah.
where can people learn more about you, the book, Koa, all those things? Where can people go to find out more information?
So my social handle on all the platforms is at Dr. Emily Anhalt. Find me there. I post about all kinds of emotional fitness tips and tricks and tools. My website is dremilyanhalt.com. I do all kinds of speaking at conferences and companies, workshops. The company is at joincoa.com. And for the book, you can find it anywhere that you find books: Amazon, Barnes & Noble, bookshop.org, wherever you find your books.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for everyone watching and listening today. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit the subscribe button as well as the bell to get notified whenever we drop new content. And if you're listening, if you could rate and review this episode, it will help more leaders find impactful people like Dr. Emily. Until next time, choose to lead with impact.